there are strong connections between the British Jewish community and the Crown. But there are many in the UK who believe that the monarchy is an outdated institution that needs to be either trimmed down or done away with entirely, or feel it's just not relevant to their lives. And that presumably includes Jews as well. After all, there was a king, Edward I, who signed the edict expelling the Jews from England in 1290, and it was the Kingslayer Oliver Cromwell who welcomed them back 4 centuries later. And the British monarch is not just a temporal figure, he's also a religious one as well, who presides over the Christian Church of England. So in this week's Jewish Forum, we discuss, should UK Jews be royalists? And joining us to discuss that in our Tel Aviv studio, I-24 News correspondent Joe Brown. From London, we have Jonathan Liss, a journalist and commentator. And we have also with us Eylon Levy, former international media advisor to the President of Israel, speaking to us from Tel Aviv. Eylon, I'm going to start with you. I could see on your social media you threw quite an elaborate Jewish Sabbath dinner, Shabbat dinner, coronation feast. So I'm assuming you feel UK Jews should be proud of the monarchy.
Well, Kalev, UK Jews should feel however they want. Britain is still a free country, despite all the trappings of monarchy and theocracy. But yes, it was a huge delight on Friday night to host a big Shabbat banquet for British and Commonwealth friends, celebrating an event that the world hasn't seen in 70 years. There you saw on the screen my orb and scepter-shaped challah. We had good fun adapting all the Jewish traditions with the royal theme, singing Shalom Aleichem to the tune of God Save the King, and Birkat HaMazon to the tune of Rule Britannia. I'm glad to say everyone leaned into the complete silliness of the occasion because, of course, everything about the coronation is absurd. It's theatre, but theatre is good fun. So it's nice once in a while to be able to lean into that.
All right. Well, let me talk to you, Jonathan. Is it good fun? Is it good theatre? Is this something Jews should take pleasure in?
Well, the first thing I would say is that for me, the Jewishness is irrelevant. I'm a Jewish person. I'm many other things. I'm also British. I'm left-wing. I also generally support the monarchy. So you could say that I'm quite a massive contradictions in lots of ways. But I kind of don't think that Jews operate as a political unit, nor have they ever done. And I don't see its bearing upon the issue one way or another. And there are some Jews who are going to be staunch Republicans, and there are other Jews who are going to be staunch monarchists, and there are many other Jews, just like the rest of the population, who are going to be slightly indifferent either way. I do agree that it's theatre, and it's absurd, obviously, to have grown men and women have crowns put on their heads and be waving swords and scepters and all the rest of it. It does also have a great sort of nostalgic element to it, which sort of stretches back hundreds of years in British history. That's why I generally support the monarchy, because I don't think that it's actually very relevant in solving the problems that Britain has, but I can understand why many people feel differently.
All right, I want to ask Joe Brown. Good nostalgic fun for the British people, including for its Jewish population?
Do you know, I 100% agree in the sense that it is all theatre, it is all a lot of fun. We have Eurovision this week. I'm a massive Eurovision fan, and watching the coronation, it did kind of remind me of Eurovision with all the fancy, absurd outfits, the music, which some of it may have been better than Eurovision music, a lot of it probably wasn't. But personally, I'm largely indifferent towards the monarchy. That's because I believe that it should be largely based off how important it is to your life. And to an extent, you can link that to Judaism as well. People interpret Judaism in many ways. There are some people who follow everything with Judaism. Some people, they might keep the Sabbath. Some people might keep kosher. Some people might just be Jewish only in name, only in familial connections. And that's because it is largely based off how you view Judaism in terms of what you would do in your life, how much of a convenience or inconvenience it would be. You can kind of link that to the monarchy as well. Does that really impact my life? Not massively. They don't make like any laws. They don't really have the final say. It's largely ceremonial. But They do actually bring in a lot of money to the UK, so that's why I'm in favour of them existing. However, and this is linking to the absurdity of everything, it cost around $100 million to put the coronation together. I understand a lot of that was security for the main event, the actual coronation ceremony, but did they really need to spend that much for, say, the concert afterwards? Was that necessary? Does that bring in the tourism? So personally, I believe that it should, I think it should exist, but it should be reformed so that it evolves just like Judaism has over hundreds of years, just like the monarchy should continue to be doing. I think it should be much more reformed.
Right. Gentlemen, I want to bring up a quote from a writer, well-known Anglo-Jewish writer, Howard Jacobson. I'm sure you all know of him. This is something he wrote for the Jewish Chronicle. British Jews have good reason to feel safe under the protection of the British royal family. It is well known the Duke of Edinburgh's mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg, was honored by Yad Vashem for hiding Jewish children in her house during World War II. Prince Charles is a regular guest at Jewish charitable events, has often spoken out eloquently against anti-Semitism in all its forms. By virtue of its principled apolitical lukewarmness, the royal family seems to promise refuge. And Alon, I want to ask you about that. Howard Jacobs says, making the point there that having a ceremonial figure who is neither of the right and left, in a sense, is gives a refuge, in a sense, to all of all the British people, including the Jews.
Absolutely. And I can say as someone who until recently worked for a head of state for President Herzog here in Israel, that there is tremendous value to having a figurehead head of state who is above politics, above daily arguments, and able to devote all of their energy towards being able to foster unity within society and celebrating diversity. At a time when you have a political system that encourages a very cutthroat form of politics, having a head of state who is able to transcend that, to connect to a nation's more ancient traditions, to remind everyone of the bigger picture, is extremely important, even in the British model where the head of state really doesn't express himself without the government's permission.
All right. Well, I want to ask Jonathan to also go on that point, though we are forgetting one thing, that the British monarch is also the head of the Church of England. That was basically, in many ways, a religious ceremony that we watched in Westminster Abbey. And that is something also that has to be taken into account in one's feelings about their monarchy.
Of course. I mean, Britain England, I should say, has an established church, and the king is the head of that. So, this is a profoundly religious and political institution. I don't think it's apolitical. It's not party political, but it is profoundly political. What we saw, how the monarchy establishes and consolidates and asserts its power, with the regalia, with the processions, with the flypast, and all of those sort of symbols, which are so important to sustaining the monarchy. Look, I wish that I could agree with Howard Jacobson about the monarchy being some kind of bulwark against possible tyranny, against possible fascism. But the point is that it's governments that decide the path of a country, not the royal family. Technically, the monarchy has the king has the power to sort of throw out the prime minister, but that is unthinkable if the prime minister has been elected by the people. It's simply not going to happen. What I do think we need is a constitutional monarchy in the actually formal sense of that term. We have a constitutional monarchy at the moment, but we don't have a formalized constitution to dictate the limits of the prime minister, who acts in the name of the king and has a large amount of power and discretion to do so. So what we really need to guard against any possible tyranny and fascism is a constitutional monarchy where the prime minister has very, very strict limits to his or her power, and so does the king, because it's not only a prime minister who can go rogue, as say Boris Johnson did a few years ago when he used the Queen's power to unlawfully suspend Parliament. It's also a future monarch who could be sort of tyrannically minded and abuse the powers, the massive powers, the prerogative powers that the monarch actually has, unfortunately hasn't used for many hundreds of years.
Right. Joe, I want to ask you, since you've talked about your indifference and lack of evidence, King Charles III has indeed, and has reached out to the Jewish community in a way that his predecessors have not. He's also tried to, in a sense, be more, if you want to say, multicultural in a way. Does that have any appeal for both young people and also young Jews, young British Jews as well? Does it make it more appealing?
Do you know, as cynical as I am towards the monarchy and towards the coronation and everything over that whole weekend, what I would say is that to Charles's credit, he did go a long way to make sure that everyone was included, not just Jews. Of course, Rabbi Mervis, the chief rabbi, stayed with King Charles before the coronation so that he could make their over Shabbat. And also there were the gospel choirs. There were people from all different sectors of the UK, and all in all, I did think that was a nice thing to do. And Prince Charles, well, formerly the Prince Charles Foundation, I'm assuming it's the King Charles Foundation now, it has done a lot of great work for charity. But my main point is, why was this not spent directed towards the actual charity of it? As I say, it was 100 million approximately was spent on the coronation. 14 million people in the UK are in relative poverty. These people could have had so much more. It would have meant so much more to them than the glitz and glamour and the goodwill and the good vibes. Getting actually something that can help them, something physical, such as even something basic like food or toiletries. That's what people need right now. And it all just seems a bit too much, really. That's the main issue that I have with the monarchy and with the whole weekend as a whole.
Alon, I would like maybe to respond to that as well, and also to the question. It's good fun, as you said, but as I said before, King Charles III is a religious figure. He's the head of the Church of England. Does that have any impact on your view of him as a British Jew?
Look, to your first question, no one denies that Britain has a serious poverty problem and the government has to deal with that. But it's worth remembering the incredible symbolism of what we saw. We saw a ceremony that took place with a chair from the 13th century using a spoon from the 12th century in a venue that has been used consistently since the 11th century, using a stone under the throne that, according to legend, came all the way from Judea. And I think that if a country were to decide that a ceremony like that is too expensive to host once every half century on average, there's a cost as well to a country giving up on those special eccentric symbols that make it such a wonderful place and allow everyone to enjoy a sense of tradition and groundedness and not just focus on the dreary realities of day-to-day politics, although no one's denying that's something that the government should absolutely focus on. As for the question of the president, the king being the head of the Church of England, personally, it's not something that bothers me. I can understand why other people would be concerned by it, but ultimately we understand it as largely a symbolic function and understand that is Britain's connection towards its own ancient history. And we respect that. Respect that, just as Israel is a Jewish state that aims to make room for its minorities and make them feel at home here as well, Britain has an established church, but at the same time is a warm and welcoming home for religious minorities. And there's no contradiction in that.
All right.
Elon, what I like to say about that is that, yes, I do agree that it is important to have some history, such as all the really old artifacts that you listed earlier. And I do think that kind of ceremony should take place. But, for example, all the extra stuff, like getting like the members of Take That, Lionel Richie, Katy Perry, was that necessary? Is that what people want to see as part of our history, as part of our culture? Well, it's not that important in my personal opinion.
Some people want to have it. Gentlemen, the history of the Jewish people in terms of monarchy is a very mixed one. But of course, the British monarchy will have to just end this by saying perhaps God save the king. Elon Levy, Joe Brown, and Jonathan List, thank you for joining us on the Jewish Forum.